And I'm extremely excited to have Nick Garner here with us today. Hey, Nick, how you doing?
I'm very well, Emma. Lovely to see you.
And you too. The reason I'm so excited to have a Nick here with us today is that he is going to be talking all things stamp duty and, more importantly, how to save money or potentially reclaim some money back on stamp duty. So who wouldn't want that, because it is such a hefty part of a property purchase. So if we can have some control of that, or at least knowledge around that, then I think it's really, really key. So yes, I'm excited about that. So if you do have any questions, then do jump on and let me know. So Nick, let's jump straight in, but let's just find out a little bit about you. I know you have done a huge amount of things in your career. It'd be lovely to just, for those people that don't know you, if you could just give a little bit of introduction to yourself.
Okay, I suppose my top fun facts are that I raced internationally in kayak racing and in flat water canoeing for many years,
Wow.
and I've raced in 3 world championships, a World Cup, and as a master, which is over 35, I've raced in 3 events. I think 3, 4 events, and yeah, I was once upon a time it was a thing, and I lived that dream for a while. I originally come from Ireland, an Anglo-Irish background, so this is where cultural references are more about England. My grandfather was a Royal Naval captain, and on the other side, they were business people in Belfast. And anyway, so I, uh, in terms of business, um, I've done a lot of different things. I'd say overall I'm an entrepreneur above everything, and I'm a great fan uh, of really looking at first principles and then extrapolating from there. And I'd say just broadly, the first principles with me are that whilst various cousins and such had nice formal educations, I grew up in good old Ireland, as I said, and didn't have the benefit of such a good education. But I ended up hustling hard over the years and did reasonably well in property. And I've read lots of books, which helps. So, if you learn to read quickly and you read a lot, then you learn a lot. But anyway, I originally got into internet marketing way back, not way back, but in the 90s, I was canoeing basically and doing what young people do, just kind of hustling. In the in 2000s, I ended up working I had a building company, early 2000s, and I just had a calling for the internet. I know it sounds strange, but it was this great tide that was building up and building momentum. And running a contracting firm is incredibly stressful and aggravating. If any of you have ever done it, you'll know what I mean. You have to be quite hardcore. Anyway, um, I just went very deep into the whole internet thing and learned about something called search engine optimization, which is basically decoding what search engines do. And then from there, one can extrapolate and then build hypotheses and then go and enact them. And then ultimately there's a result or a consequence, which in this case is achieving rankings. And I ended up working in the gambling industry. Not very wholesome, but anyway, there is a lot of money where there's money, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I did reasonably well there, and I had a marketing agency. In 2012, I worked in a company called Betfair, then a company called Unibet, and I set up a marketing agency in 2012, basically standing on top of all of that experience that I gained. And from there, I ended up selling that to as part of an overall sale by a company called ICS to Racing Post. So that was a good outcome
Oh.
in many ways. And then because I'd been in that scene, I ended up founding a online casino. Again, not very wholesome. But the key thread that was running through everything was learning how to build teams, learning about how to sell things and market things and systems and processes. In the meantime, there was this backstory going on around property, and uh, just we got the timing right, and that was just luck as much as anything. But we ended up doing a build around 2015, our own family home, which was a very good financial decision. So it's a 230 square meter, 4-bed, 3-bath house in a prime area in a place called Gerrard's Cross, which it's just a very nice place, and we did very well with it. But anyway, so eventually after 2019, I sold the casino and did reasonably well with it. We found a niche market. Some other people felt that they could do better than us with what we had, with what we created. And then I just timed out and got into sort of that full time, got into property properly. And I set up a property sourcing business. And in that, the mission was to really understand how property, or how a segment of property works, buy to let, and really just get to the bottom of a big question, which is, how do you pick the best buy to let property? And it's a simple question with a very complex answer. And the answer, by the way, is for me anyway, to look at people first, because property is a people thing, and it's very tied up with aspirations, with the idea that people like people who are like themselves, and therefore if you fall back on demographics and capital growth data and crime data, and you look at all of that in a kind of holistic way, bearing in mind there are thousands of metrics you can use, but there's only a few that really count, then one can predict which areas are best, which are going to have the best capital gain outcomes, and also which areas did what during various cycles, and whether they're overcooked or not. Anyway, I set up I created 3 courses on Udemy. They're free, and I think I've got about 2,400 students. So and I think my average rating is 4.8 out of 5. So it's, Emma can share all this later on, but it's there, they're free, and they seem to be quite popular. And really it's just the embodiment of some of the knowledge that I've got on the topic. Anyhow, it was all going beautifully, as things do. And then September, so we ended up having a niche, and the niche was Hong Kong Chinese buyers. And the reason that works is because we were still are working with an educator, and these people are a long way from here, and they just need help to get this right. And the flavor of sourcing that we have always gone for is the one where we try to help people avoid trouble, because it's very easy to fall into lots of trouble with property if you don't know what you're doing. And so by understanding all the demographics and the capital gain and so on, we're able to identify those properties which are they just work. They're going to attract nice tenants who are going to look after your house. The capital growth is going to be there. It all works. But the market seized up for us in September 22, when Gatehouse Bank, who are the primary lender for this particular cohort, left the market. And then we were just sitting there with what was a lot of business. So I think that year we transacted about 100 properties. So in other words, we sourced 100 properties or so for clients. It was just plowing along beautifully. Then it wasn't. And we were left with lots of property and no income. So I came across this stamp duty reclaim thing, and as I do, I started getting into it. I decoded how it worked, and we had lots of cases to experiment on because we had all these clients we'd sourced property for, and we got it right. And then this idea of skill stacking, which is a very important notion, as by bit of luck, a lot of design, I ended up skill stacking in a certain way to produce what we got now. And the skills that have been stacked are a lot of tech knowledge. So in other words, being able to build systems and processes to save time but give a better output. In other words, the cases that we produce, there's a lot of there's quite a lot of tech behind that, actually, a lot of conditional logic and so on. So we got that. There's the legal stuff, and it just so happens that in my family there are lots of lawyers, and even I've even got an uncle who's a judge, would you believe, or was retired now. But point is that there's something in my brain which is good with legal stuff, and when you combine that with the power of search engines and tools like ChatGPT or whatever, it's much easier to start getting answers, to dig through the legislation, to understand the source of issues, and then of course corroborating it with friends who are lawyers and what have you, and then pulling together solid case arguments or whatever the objective is. Anyway, the business is going really well, and that's because we're stacking on top of tech, very solid case files, well, extremely solid case files, which I can talk about if you're interested. So this whole idea of HMRC compliant reclaims, which is a whole thing in itself, but I'll talk about that. And then we've got the marketing. So because I spent many years working in search engine optimization, we've put a lot of content on the website, and that's beginning to rank around the internet. And so if you trust Google, and most people do, and you find us, then you trust us. That's the kind of idea. The other thing that we've been really successful with is structuring the team and how that works. So broadly, there are 12 of us in the business now. So the salespeople are me, obviously, and then we've got Lewis and Reese, and we've got another Greer who's coming on board, and they're all based over here. And the way it works is we have all the admin function in Macedonia, and the way that works is that because wages are that much lower there, but the quality of work is really high, and because this is a very admin intensive activity, although we've cut down the admin, the amount of admin in the process because of all the systems we've put together, nevertheless, it means that we can be competitive on our reclaim rates, as it were, and we have meat on the bone, as it were, to do marketing, stronger marketing than other people. So therefore we can get the word out. And I've been writing a book, and it's as anyone who's written a book knows. Yeah, so Emma and I were talking about this the other week, actually. It's always such a mission. So anyway, it's nearly done.
And I think actually, Nick, the mission is more getting it launched than the writing now when I'm comparing it. But anyway, that will soon be done.
Well, there's a beautiful phrase, isn't there? You don't know what you don't know. And since I've never written a book before, I don't know what I'm in for. But I have friends in the world of publishing, so we're going to work on that. But anyway, the book is up to just a touch under 1,000 pages, 220,000 words.
That's amazing.
It's been a huge project. But the point is that instead of going to university to learn about stamp duty, and there is no course doing that topic, I decided to write a book because that way I could get deep into it and really just going to exercise myself on all the different facets and all the different elements, because they in aggregation, there are all sorts of weird use cases that always turn up, and then at least I know my way around it, and it's a thing that one can give away to people.
Amazing, amazing.
Yeah.
Can I
Anyway.
just touch on, there's obviously a lot of successful people out there who, have had successful sporting accolades in their career. I can't admit to being doing anything as amazing as what you're doing, but I certainly got to a reasonably high level horse riding,
Okay.
and things like that. Do you feel that really gave you, I'm just interested myself, that gave you this kind of grounding to be so very thorough? Because it just seems to me, everything that you've talked about here, you've talked about entrepreneurship, but you've also spoken about, is extremely thorough, your tech knowledge, the legals, the marketing, the team, all of these kind of stacking up in a skill set. Do you think that came, and originally came from your sporting prowess?
I'd say it originally. Interesting question. So I'm vice commodore of a canoe club in Richmond upon Thames, one of the biggest in the country. I think sort of 450 members, depending on the time of the year. And I see a lot of, and I've been there for a very long time, for 36 years. When I came to England back in 1987, I joined there. And you just see people come and go, and there's definitely people who just have it baked in their brains. They're more motivated, they're more rigorous, and they try harder than the next person. And I think, as you'll know, Emma, if you're going to get good at something, there is every self-help coach person will say the same thing. You just got to put the effort in. It's not really true. You got to put the right effort in. And I know when I look back on my life, I've spent an awful lot of effort on things that didn't work. But then life is kind of an accumulation of knowledge, and I think what sport gives you is, or competing gives you, is A, you're comfortable with competing, because a lot of people aren't, and B, you're prepared to just get stuck in and give it your best. And a lot of people aren't. It's not that they don't want to work hard enough. It's just that they're afraid to work hard enough, because if they go all in on something and it's a fail, then they get very upset and they go, oh, the world hates me. But failure is just, it's okay. You just pick up, get on, do the next thing, and on it goes. And as I get older, I'm 50, nearly 57 now, and I reflect on this a lot, and I think endeavor is what keeps. Endeavor is a beautiful thing as long as it's productive, and sport is like an interesting concentration of endeavor, isn't it? Really. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that. And actually, my daughter, she's transpires. We do tetrathlons, which is swimming, running, shooting, and riding. And it transpires that she's pretty good at shooting.
Okay.
She's only 8, but I really want to get her into a competition. She hasn't got to the competition yet, because there can be that real differential, can't there, between people who are exceptionally good at something, but then actually being good at something within a pressurized environment can sometimes make people fall apart. I know one of my sons, very, very, basically a professional biker, but when it comes to the competitions, he doesn't always have that edge. And I think it is, a mindset thing. So, yeah.
It is, absolutely. So the answer, it's a very simple paradigm. It's a very simple situation. So what happens is the best athletes, like this is sports psychology 101, best athletes don't feel the pressure. In other words, they're just oblivious to it. They're in the zone, which means that they're in this beautiful place where everything is flowing and effortless. And this idea of flow, it's a thing. So there's a book there's a guy called, his name will come to me. It's got an incredibly long name, but the point about it is that flow is a thing. It's a state of mind, and people who can get into flow and weirdly become slightly delusional, because the delusion is that it really matters, but the flow state says it's just effortless and I'm having fun and here I am. And it's a bit like someone singing on stage in front of 50,000 people. they're in a beautiful, happy place. And it's kind of delusional, because if they mess up, it's going to be consequential. But learning how to create that delusion in a nice way is a really good thing. So yeah, this is the big thing in life, I think, just to be able to get into flow and think about outcomes rather than having good outcomes. So in other words, set yourself a point to where you want to be. So with the stamp duty business, for example, I want to be the person people go to when they need help, and I want our business to be for us collectively to be those people who help you get your money back,
Love it,
because
love it.
you pay too much stamp duty, or so many people do. And I did some calculations on it the other day, and it was something like 1.7 billion pounds a year is probably is overpaid in stamp duty. And it was based on some fairly conservative numbers, based on the number of higher properties paying higher rate stamp duty. And then if you assume that, say, 14 to 20% of properties are not habitable technically, you just do some numbers, and it turns into big money, but huge money that I find it hard to comprehend.
Amazing.
But anyway, yeah, sorry.
Well, let's just jump straight into the real sort of nuts and bolts, so to speak. But I know we mentioned this before, but can you explain to people, and especially if they're kind of a bit newer to property, or even just new to the knowledge that inherently solicitors know, as I understand it, about 4 to 5 ways that you might reduce or mitigate your stamp duty. But as I understand it, and certainly last time I looked, I think there's 50 ways, certainly 49 to 50 ways that you can reduce or mitigate your stamp duty. And I think there's, well, as you've said, you're writing a book, and currently it's 250,000 words. I mean, that is a massive book.
I know, it's too big, really, but I'm gonna have to chop it up and repurpose it for different people,
put it into different things. But yeah, would you be able to sort of explain who is responsible for stamp duty, and for who is the one that has to have that knowledge of the stamp duty? Is it your solicitor? Is it us? It would be really great to feedback on that.
Firstly, let's start with, what are you like as a person? So if you're the kind of person that just rolls along and you trust highly paid professionals to get it right for you, and you believe they care about you enough to always do the right thing for you, then you shouldn't bother listening to this anymore, because they got you covered.
I like it.
Yeah. The thing with conveyancing solicitors are they're administrators, and their job is to identify risk, and they work in a highly regulated environment, and they take lots of risk anyway, because they give advice, and if the advice is wrong, then they can be sued potentially. That's all if, but, maybe, potentially, etc. But theoretically, that's the case. And I think a lot of conveyancing solicitors are just nervous about being caught up as being promoters of bad tax advice. So they'll always say to you, we're not tax accountants. Go talk to a tax accountant if that's what you want to do. But on the whole, they know a few basics, like, that looks like a house. It's a house. It's residential. That's an office. The same. And that's all fine. But the underlying bottom line is that the form that they complete, the SDLT1, well, the bottom line is, it's a self-assessed tax.
Yeah.
So whilst you got a conveyancing solicitor doing it for you, they're doing it on your behalf. So if the conveyancing solicitor messes up, technically they're not responsible, because it's a self-assessed tax, and you've agreed to let them act on your behalf, to act as an agent, in effect, to submit your stamp duty form or stamp duty payment. Same with Wales, same with Scotland, all the same. So anyway, they mess up frequently, and it's because they don't really care, and they are risk averse, so they just do what they think is the most straightforward thing. That's it. So I can tell you about many horror stories with conveyancing solicitors. Would you like to hear a horror story?
Well, yeah, I definitely do. And let me just to clarify that the story I told you, I'm just buying an HMO at the moment. It's quite a decent size one, 9-bed. Anyway, I sent my sales memorandum to 2 conveyancers because I'm a bit uncertain if I wanted to carry on with the one I'm currently using, and they both came back with like massively different amounts of stamp duty that needed to be paid. One was 10 grand and one was 22 grand. And I just thought, my gosh, it's, that is very interesting that just a straightforward comparison like that. But yes, let's hear a horror story.
Okay, so by the way, there are lots of questions about how do I get my stamp duty back.
Yeah,
we can talk about that.
Yeah, we're just about to.
Okay.
We'll
Cool.
come back
All right.
to those. I just wanted to get the kind of basics in, and then we'll come
Okay.
back to those.
So just for laughs, the worst best was a property sold for about 2.2 million, and it had it was near a river, and the part of it was a boatyard, and the other, so split title, so plot A, plot B. Plot A, boatyard, trading business, that's a boatyard, it's a boatyard. And plot B, a house. Anyway, the conveyancing solicitor assessed the whole thing as residential, even though it was mixed use. And so the idea is if a property is mixed use, in other words, commercial and residential, then the whole lot is taxed at non-residential stamp duty rates. But anyway, the solicitor was absolutely adamant about this. So yeah, it's residential, it's residential. And I did some research, and obviously that wasn't the case. But the solicitor keeps protesting his innocence. Anyway, the bottom line is that the amount of money, we're talking about £145,000 difference between residential rates and non-residential rates. Thankfully, it's a straightforward situation to clean up, which I've done. But it's just like, what the hell? Another one, just what other, is a friend of mine has a property. She's doing an HMO actually, and she wanted to self-assess as non-residential before at completion, and that's a whole topic we can talk about. But anyway, conveyancing solicitor does the SDLT1 form, and she tells the solicitor, right, just make sure it's non-residential for stamp duty purposes. But the solicitor couldn't really understand what that meant. So the solicitor classified it as a house. But then on the other section in the SDLT1, where it talks about not refunds, but stamp duty reliefs, said that the property was actually farmland, because it was the only way the solicitor could reconcile the idea that that thing is a house, but they want it non-residential. So technically, what the solicitor was about to do was say that a 3-bed semi-detached house in Hounslow was farmland, like commercial farmland. And anyway, I got it in time and told the solicitor to do exactly X, Y, and Z, which I've explained in my book, funnily enough. And all was kind of well in the end. But the thing about these kind of mistakes is that HMRC have what they call data trawls. What they do is they look for inconsistencies in the returns, and if they see an inconsistency, then you could trigger as an inquiry, and off you go. And she was walking straight into a lot of aggravation, but so far so good. So there's 9 months in which HMRC have to inquire from date of the submission of the SDLT1, and once that 9 months is over, it's kind of over. So far, she hasn't had an inquiry yet. But
so is that for all of it, Nick? So if you put in a stamp duty claim that you believe is correct, and then 9 months has passed, if they do not question that, then we're okay?
Yeah. Subject to it not being a fraudulent case. The thing with all the stamp duty stuff is, if you kind of know your way around it, it's incredibly easy to commit widespread fraud. It just the sums are quite big, and the whole thing is quite loose, which is why HMRC get really fussy about things like authorizations, and why why things can slip into what they call a technical team, which is where they do more investigations and so on. So we've got one case where the case is straightforward, but the person behind the case isn't, and it's gone into the technical team, and well, we'll find out what happens then. But
so
on the whole,
you mean the purchaser is a complex case?
The purchaser is complex. I really can't say anything more than that, but it's very interesting how HMRC operate. So the whole trick with all of this, by the way, is to keep it really straightforward. But we could talk about we can talk about, there are two buckets really. One is where you've paid stamp duty and you want to get it back because you've overpaid it. And there are various circumstances in which you can do that. And the other is you're going to buy something and you believe that it justifies being assessed as non-residential, and therefore you're avoiding paying the tax, and you got all of that stuff. So that's a bucket. So there are two buckets, and we can break that down and talk about each one.